Well, we have lauded our friends and family here today, appropriately so. Every once in a while, when I think back about where we are, I always do that Beloit College business, About every 1st of September, Beloit College puts out a listing of what was going on when our traditional freshmen walked in the door. But since we start 3 weeks earlier than Beloit, we get to kind of skip up and presage them a bit. But for those of you that are old enough to remember 1995, I thought this might be of interest to you. Some of you hard to forget 1995, I can see that right now. So just a couple of touch points. The year of Bill Clinton and Al Gore, of course. They had already sung Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow, but we were still in that era. Yahoo was set up as the very first search engine. Hard to believe today. South Africa won the Rugby Cup. Forbes declared Bill Gates richest man in the world. A couple of milestones for us here, obviously. One was the April 15th bombing, which we'll never forget and will be with us forever. And in some ways, people look upon that moment as a pivotal point in Oklahoma City and perhaps Oklahoma's contemporary history. One of my favorite events, of course, occurred on October the 3rd when O.J. Simpson was found not guilty for the murder of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. Not that I was pleased that he was found not guilty, but I have a line that I've been able to use from Johnny Cochran, the glove and the litmus test, and that is, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. November 30th, of course, was the official end of Operation Desert Storm in Iraq, Kuwait, and the Gulf, or so we thought. We were going to be returning some years later. If you were a baseball fan, it was Atlanta's year. If you were a football fan, it was San Francisco. Nebraska went undefeated that year, and UCLA won in basketball. If you love film, it was Tom Hanks and Forrest Gump. The TV was dominated by Seinfeld, ER, NYPD Blue, and Friends. And just imagine we paid $1.34 for a gallon of gas. What a groan, wow. These touchstones are important only for this reason. Our traditional freshmen were not born yet. That was their year. And everything that happened before, and that year and before, is, dare I say this, Civil War history to them? Something from the past, and for you, it's part of the vibrant part of who you are, and each one of you relates to that in your own way. As these years pass, and later on we'll play some of the 1995 music as you're leaving, I'm realizing just how long we've been doing this work and what a joy it is to see those new faces that will cross in front of us in your classrooms, in the work that you do, on the yard, etc. Well, John really captured, I think, in many ways, the sense of the era that we're living in. We chose this term, embracing dynamic change, because we refuse to be cowed by this process. Dynamic change is with us, global to local, interpersonal, including right here at home. Last year at this time, you had a different cabinet. Some 2 years ago, as I was walking across the yard, a member of the faculty stopped me and said, President Betz, Don, whatever, really glad to see you, like what you're doing, et cetera. But I'm kind of surprised. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I expected a lot more change. I said, well, a lot of things are changing. He said, well, no, I meant a lot more people changing. And I said, you've taken, just wait. Time is a great leveler, time and circumstance, and we never know how it's going to work. But the fact remains that now we have an emerging new cabinet because of opportunities and well-earned retirements and so forth. So we are here even close to home, in my backyard. We are in the vortex of dynamic change. Bob Dylan wailed a long time ago for us, and I said a couple years ago, these times, they are changing. One of the biggest changes is the way the public, much of the public, looks at you and at me and at what we do. And I think we have to be very realistic about this. There's a change in the image, in the reputation, and the expectation of higher education. At the same time, higher education has never been more important to personal and societal growth and development, and simultaneously never been under more scrutiny and criticism by government, by students, by parents, and by the media. We are called on to fulfill the responsibilities of Complete College America by our governor and other elected officials, even as colleges and universities are taken to task for rising tuition, related costs, time to degree, retention, graduation rates, and substandard teaching preparation of teachers, or so it's alleged. There's even a vocal faction, it's hard to even say in this hall, that questions the necessity of a university education at all. College education is portrayed by some as exclusively a private gain rather than equally an essential investment in the public good. But if you look at the numbers, state taxpayer support for higher education across the country has not been this low since 1965, when there are 16 million fewer students in the system. This is some of the perspective offered to us by Jeff Salingo in his book, College Unbound. And I strongly urge you to take a look at this book. If you already know it, you say, yeah, I've already read this one. But if you haven't, if you're in the business of teaching and learning and caring about what happens to students and to institutions, read this book. It's not a harangue or diatribe against higher ed. It's a very clear comment about the situation that we find ourselves. He scans the horizon and he looks at the place of higher ed in local, national, and global perception. And he says that there is, quote, nothing short of winning the lottery that can help ensure a young person will achieve the American dream, quite like a college degree. A 4-year college credential has been the best ticket for kids from the poorest families to get ahead. And yet, here's the asterisk. At the same time, higher ed in the United States is becoming much less of a meritocracy. The percentage of students with the highest incomes who got a bachelor's degree has improved to 82%. But those at the bottom of the socioeconomic scale has fallen to just 8%. Unacceptable. Access, equity, diversity, persistence to success. These are important to this university, to this metropolitan area, and to this state. There are no shortcuts to real growth and development and economic development if we don't address these issues. We, like all around us, are adapting to changes enveloping virtually every dimension of our lives. And that's why in this swirl, it's important for us to have a shared vision. We're being changed by technology, by multiplying interests, and by varying learning styles, and changes in personal expectations. We're all impacted by information and by the nurturing of what I call the great words that came from Ken Robinson and Malcolm Gladwell, the creation of being in our element, that connection of confluence of talents and passion and persistence that carry us beyond our perceived limitations. In higher ed and here at UCO, we are committed to nurturing and to encouraging the finding of that element where those forces converge in our students and hopefully in each other. So we have all these problems swirling around us, and they're looking for problem solvers, and part of that problem-solving work turns to, obviously, education, even as we're being consistently misfunded or underfunded. And we have to ask ourselves if graduating people from college and that criteria alone tells us that we are ready to compete in the hyper-speed global knowledge and manufacturing economy. There's a second book I'd like to mention, and John mentioned it a little bit earlier, and that is The Metropolitan Revolution. This is particularly important to the University of Central Oklahoma. In fact, it's more important to us than any other university in Oklahoma. Why? Because we are carving out a piece of the turf, a piece of place that, as John mentioned, that is very important to us. There is no question, if you make your way through Katz's and Bradley's book, that cities are the rising power and they are the centers of trade and the vanguard of policy innovation. It's important to realize that the identity that people have with a particular place makes it possible for them to grow and change and become more powerful and more prosperous than ever before. So the place can become more important than the politics. The place can overcome partisanship. And in that report that you almost sat on, I'm sure when you came in, the report to the community, we really point up the notion about our role in this place. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in and of this place. We are part of this metro's emerging sense of who it is and what it wants to become. And of all the institutions that surround it, there is none that is more pivotal in terms of the future growth. Job growth, expertise growth, and people that learn and graduate and stay. Our numbers are telling, very prophetic. Stick a pin in the ground and draw it out 75 miles or so, as John had mentioned, and you find out that most of our graduates, not all, they're in Singapore and London and Chicago and Denver, et cetera, but most of our graduates went home to their place, to the place that inspired and moves them, to the place they said I could have moved to, but I decided to become a blank in this place and to raise that family and to build that community and to serve on that school board and to be on that city council because I really care what happens to this place. Well, we are part of that. Successful cities are sustainable, collaborative places. They're a mixture and linkage of manufacturing and innovation. And the great philosopher Dolly Parton once quipped, find out who you are and then do it with purpose and passion. And I would say collaboration. Find out who you are. I think there was a time when the University of Central Oklahoma or Central State University or whatever it was called was caught in the notion that it had to be something like other institutions around it, that the frame of reference was drawn pretty close. And you should be like perhaps your regional university peers, or perhaps you should be like the two Research One institutions that are public, or perhaps even like a private. Well, the big difference between us and our regional university peers is that we're in a huge metro area and they're in small communities. And we are not a Research One institution, and that's not our goal. And I believe we have appropriately shed that mantle and have now stepped up and say, excuse me, there is a third way. There is a third step. There is a third type of institution that is so desperately needed, not only in Oklahoma, but around the country, that recognizes the role and responsibility of education to change people's lives in growing metro areas. We're that institution. Our peers are not in this place, are not in this state. We have not a single peer in Oklahoma. Even the regions, both our sets of regions, have identified and recognized that our peers are in Atlanta and Wichita and Boise and Fresno and Youngstown and Detroit and Missouri, et cetera. Institutions that are of size or larger that serve metropolitan areas. And even with those, I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure I've found my perfect peer for us. I've got a few good candidates. The fact remains is we're building something very unique and I think incredibly useful here. One of the ways we're doing that is through transformative learning. And I know this term sparks conversation because I've watched some of you speak about it. It's sort of like pixie dust or magic word, transformative, something special. Well, the answer is, yes, something special does happen, but let's say the terminology might be an inhibitor, so although I really love it and we're going to stay with it. But another term that's been used by AAC&U, the American Association of Colleges and Universities, that was discussed yesterday at the LEAF Forum, is integrative learning. Integrative learning. And that's the notion that's fairly clearly understood, and that is you help undergraduates put the pieces together to develop the habits of mind, and I would say of the heart, to prepare them to make informed judgments about their personal and professional life. Integrative learning, preparing them for a world that we cannot know, but we know they're going to have to function in. Building their capacities to learn how to learn and to share it with others. I think it's central to their personal success, to societal responsibility, and to civic engagement in today's global society. And I embrace AAC&U's statement because I think it's one expression of what you've been doing here since I first arrived in January of 1999. I watched it evolve, and many of the people in this room had a role in our understanding who we were and what we could become. So we have now called ourselves an institution that's moving on a pathway toward transformative learning using the central 6 precepts. But it's really about preparing students for incredible lives of meaning and purpose and prosperity and productivity. It's not pixie dust. It's the marrow of what makes a great place a distinctive place. And look where we are. We're in the midst of a state that's still figuring out what it wants to be. We live in the center of a state that does not have, as most states, a long-term view of what it should become. And we know, just by the nature of the political process, that budgets are formed on a yearly basis. Now, I don't know about you, but it would be very hard to live my life knowing that the only thing that was for sure was the next 12 months. So we say, collectively, we see it a little differently. We believe in the midst of dynamic change, guided by our values and guided by our mission and vision, and we embrace this change, is that we want to look further. I was absolutely delighted when Governor Fallin came to this campus almost 2 years ago and declared complete college America in Evans Hall. I was delighted because she chose to do it here. But that's the first time in my memory, going back to 1971, that any public official had talked about higher education in multi-year segments. That over the next 12 or 13 years, it would be possible for us to think, plan, and do what we want to become. And even though the goals are harrowing, 67% increase in graduates over that many years, the idea that we were ready and willing and able to do it, I tell you, I trumpeted that and still do. I don't want anyone to forget, whether they're in a political position or a business position or an educational position, of what was articulated. It may have been a moment in time, but basically we said, this is worth planning for. Because the view was this: the world, that dynamic change we're talking about, is swirling so dramatically that if we don't plan, we won't have the right people in the right place with the right background and thought processes and degrees to be able to be, quote, competitive. And you can interpret that as you like. For me, it's the way you build society. It's the way you build community, and we're still lagging behind nationally in the number of college graduates. So I embrace complete college America, and I embrace Governor Fallin's recent ascendance to the chair of the National Governors Association, because once again, these goals can be trumpeted, but we have to be there as an institution and as individuals, reminding the body politic and elected officials that these are articulated public goals, and that we feel that we are a major collaborative partner in that process. Now, if you've been involved at all in the Vision 2020 planning, and if I asked you all to stand, we'd probably have a good part of this room. Hundreds at the beginning, dozens since, have been working through the mission statements, the vision statements, and all of the precepts through the 4 fantastic teams that we've had. If you go through all of that, what you finally come out with is that we know that we are here as an institution, the vision statement would be a good time for that, to embrace our role as a collaborative partner and leader. Very important. We're a partner, but we're a leader in this region and in this state to meet the educational, the business, community aspirations of the greater Oklahoma City area, and I would spread it out, obviously, to the state. I think there's a symbiotic relationship growing up between this metro area, figuring out, gee, we really are a metro area, and this university, we are the only public master's granting 4-year institution in the metro area with natural and strong linkages to every one of the 2-year institutions. As one of my friends would say, this is a no-brainer. We can see the connection. If the goal is more graduates and more people able to accomplish this work and beef up our workforce and our entrepreneurial force, then how do you extract the University of Central Oklahoma and accomplish it? Or perhaps put another way, you can't get there without us. You can't. Now, some of you may be doing the math and say, well, he's not exactly right, but just think about how our students and our families live in this region. They come here and they go home and they go to their jobs, and when they connect with us by the internet, et cetera, all that is well and good, but that sense of place is here with us. And the relationships that we enjoy with the 2-year institutions, in my mind, create all new opportunities for connections and coalitions and consortiums that link us with 2-year institutions and K-12 and the rest, because we are a natural hub once the consciousness of the importance of education is elevated to a certain level. And it's moving in that direction. We have a governor who is saying that what's important is the growth of the workforce and the growth of education. And 2 years ago, she said, complete college America on this campus is the great goal. This vision statement is important, and it's aspirational, obviously, but it's aspirational in the right way. We believe in the creation of innovative partnerships, adhering to the fundamental commitment to provide this transformative teaching and learning. We want to engage our students in experiential learning, very important part of it, what we're doing. We want to make sure that there are activities that advance the quality of life for all. We want to support lifelong learning and workforce development. We want to make sure that our research and professional services have an impact on the region. And again, these are attributes and aspects that are found in the documents that have been generated by dozens of you who deserve to be here with me applauding you rather than the other way around. I have been delighted and amazed in all the right directions at the quality of what you've done. Each of the teams digging deep, learning about where we are. Team B, for example, doing the kind of work they're doing, what Mark Kinders calls the deep dive into the marrow of what the metro is and what it's going to need. Do you know, no one, as I think I'm right on this, Mark, no one's asking these questions. No one is asking these questions. What overall does the metro need, and will it need, not tomorrow morning or not at the end of the next legislative session? What about 5 years from now? What about 10 years from now? What's the prognosis down the road? Well, for us, it's we're going to be here. We're going to be creating new graduates with new horizons and new senses of opportunity, strong entrepreneurial backgrounds, strong sense of authenticity and integrity, and people who know their disciplines but also are imbued with the full expression of what we talk about in the Central Six. They come out ready and prepared. That's the goal. Does every one of our students do that today? Absolutely not. Does that mean I should be despondent? Obviously not. It's because we know where we're going. We're not wandering. We're not figuring, gee, I wonder, maybe next year will kind of be like this year, et cetera. And we're not just waiting for someone to do something for us, to hand us an opportunity. To members of teams A, B, C, and D, to Drs. K.J. Tullis and Dan Mertens, and my colleague, Mr. Mark Kinders, you are leading the most appropriate review and compilation of what a university can possibly become in this particular circumstance. I thank you. We are going to learn what it means to be a metro institution, and we're going to do it better than anyone else because frankly, we have the hidden ingredient, which I'll talk about here in a minute. Now, you all know that we're underfunded. I love talking about money. And every year, we have a greater reliance on fees and other revenues. John mentioned we're about half funded from the state now as 10 years ago. Well, compared to our metro peers, we're about a $25 million operating budget gap, adjusting for size, et cetera. We're about 90, a little less than 90 maybe now, John, in faculty positions behind and about 80 staff positions. It's okay. So do we wake up in the morning and become, despondent? No, what we do is we say, first, we've totally restructured our federal grant process, and thanks to Mark Kinders and Greg Wilson and tons of other people, and I apologize immediately for not mentioning your name specifically, but I know what you do and I care about what you do. We're taking a different approach, and we are going after bigger dollars at the federal level. We have set very high targets, and we are pursuing them avidly. Will we have them tomorrow morning? The answer, no. Will we have them in 2 to 3 years? You bet. In 4 years, yes, and in 5 years, yes. There'll be another kind of stream of revenue coming in. Does it supplant all what we need? No, but it's one of the streams that needs to be looked at. We're going back to the state, and we're going to make a very strong case about this institution's funding. Working very closely with our good friends in administration, we're going to put together a 5-year enhancement plan that we're going to bring forth and basically say, we're different. We're different than any other university you have in the system in several ways, and one is we are most egregiously underfunded, and we can see a 5-year step plan to get us into the same range vis-a-vis our peers as the Research One institutions Oklahoma vis-a-vis their peers. I'm not going to give you all the details right now, but that's integral to our efforts and our relationships. We have politically that's going to be a real test. But I believe it is absolutely essential. The case is clear. The case is clear. We have secured a leading national market and revenue enhancement corporation to help us analyze other revenue streams that may naturally grow out of the work that you do. This is being done at a local, regional, and national level. We are looking further out. Foundation and development, we are continuing the very successful completion of UCO's first comprehensive campaign, Always Central. You remember the original goal was $40 million, and under the incredible leadership of Ann Holzberline and her amazing team, as of the other day, we are at $36,700,000. And I'll give you a little sidebar here. In 2002, when our fundraising entity inside the institution collapsed, and I can tell you that now because I was the provost at the time, Steve Kreidler and I met in, I think it was my office, and we decided we have to put together some glue and spit and sealing wax kind of system to keep this thing going, because we can't lose the notion that we need to raise money desperately, and we put together an entity which tided us through thanks to all of the colleges and eventually grew. But as I said to Steve before we left, $36,700,000. If someone had walked up with a $7,000 check, we probably would have dropped dead at that moment, because the sense of the opportunity and the possibility wasn't there. What I haven't been able to announce to you yet is that in July, at the end of July, I received a letter in my office, and in it was the pledge of a $1 million gift, and the first $250,000 arrived with it to be paid very expeditiously. The donor has asked to remain anonymous, but it's gone specifically for Old North, and so we're $4 million short, but that's a lot better than $6.5 million. And to that donor, thank you for your belief in what this university is all about. The donor is... and the donor is not a graduate. Part of the expression of our development is the boathouse. And I know when the boathouse project came along, for some of you, I'm sure it was, gee, I need this in my department, and why are we building a boathouse? Well, I inherited the boathouse when I arrived, and I'm glad I did. We finished the funding of it, not a dime from E&G. Nor from, I find interesting, from donors who say they would rather give to your department or division or college or Old North or whatever. There's a strong specific interest. This is part of that metro profile, like the Academy for Contemporary Music or the Small Business Development Center, our work with the Downtown Consortium, et cetera. That expression of us smack in the middle of the metro. We're the first public university to have the boathouse in place, and I thank Kevin Tiro and David Stapleton and all the great people in that side work of the house who are doing the work right now with the architects and the engineers. We've got a couple of wonderful partners, and I hope late in the fall we'll put a shovel in the dirt, and within a year we'll all go down to the finest boathouse / music and art venue that has ever been in this region. Once again, announcing to people that just when you think you know who we are, we're going to surprise you as an institution. Soon, we will be talking about the creation of a school of lifelong learning. That lifelong learning school conversation has begun with the deans, and Dr. Barthel and others are working through, but it's going to aggregate some of the natural outreach pieces of the institution in order to create more connection with the community and also be a fundraising area. And the quality of life issue, which was addressed by Team A, I thank them very much, because I think the Team A notion that we want to be a place where we hold each other accountable, where we break down silos and create a culture of collaboration and change is exactly the direction we're going in. Your honesty and your candor in addressing those issues are very important to me and to us. In the coming year, you'll see the rollout of the Strategic Enrollment Management Plan. It's a big project. I thank Dr. Myron Pope and many other people that are involved, Dr. Jay Corwin, Adam Johnson, a whole phalanx of people that we're going to be working on identifying of our key performance indicators. But I can tell you this, that one of our first goals is that we're going to go after this retention rate. This retention rate, we're not worthy of this retention rate as an institution. You're too good at what you do, and I know what you're going to tell me about students that are coming in and are unprepared, et cetera. I know that. This is where we are. This is where we are. We're not in Cambridge. We're here. And so what we do is we serve the people that are here, and we're going to find ways, very creative and appropriate ways to do this. But here's the test, that we want to take the retention rate, improve it by 10% over the next 5 years, and I'm going to cut that number back probably to 4 or 3, but I'm going to start with 5. We want to bring that retention rate up. We are so close in terms of the actual number of individual students that have to move from not finishing to finishing, that our numbers could increase dramatically, Myron, by moving 300 students, correct? Close? 300. The 300. And this is not Thermopylae, right? The 300. This is 300 students who, if they can go from, I'm not going to make it, I'm going to parking lot and getting in my truck and going home, to crossing the stage and getting a diploma cover from me, we will not only change the number, but it will change the resource flow, and change their lives. And change their lives, which is, I know why you showed up in the first place. In the coming year, we will be addressing issues of branding, the work that's been done, and this includes Charlie and a zillion other people. We've gone on a 5-year cycle. We're going to be reviewing all of that as we move into this metro consciousness about who we are. We want to be able to make sure that that brand really resonates. We're doing good work in gathering the research right now. And it'll be time for us to look at the comprehensive physical master plan, to take a look at our physical plan. Some people tell me, you don't need any more buildings anymore. Everybody's going to learn online. In fact, I don't even need you. I just need you to work from home. I'll retire long before that. I can't imagine the students that I know at this institution and have passed through my life, that their lives would have been anything close to what they become if they didn't know you. If you hadn't reached out to them at the appropriate time. And I'm not quite sure you can do that with bandwidth. I think you have to do it another way. And you know how to do it. And please understand, I'm no Luddite when it comes to technology. Though I'm not great at it, I love it and use it constantly, and I know it as a tool, as an appropriate tool that we use to its nth degree in order to do what we promise to do, and that is to help students learn. Well, the last point I wanted to make about this year was we really set our mind on trying to recognize and reward performance, effort, and accomplishment. And so I asked for some numbers to be run over the last 2 years. And I can tell you, I think with a degree of confidence that more resources have been moved into the hands of faculty and staff in the last couple of years than no previous comparable period for a couple of reasons. And that's just overall E&G. We have a new student activity fee, which is 2 pieces have come into place. We had an increase in tuition and fees twice. We did a merit this year, which, according to Bill Radke, who left, is unprecedented in its size at the institution, and he went back 38 years. We looked at the Coupa adjustments and trying to move faculty and staff, which affect many of you, not all, to at least to an 85 to 92%, 85 for staff, 92% for regional averages. If you look at that in terms of numbers, in terms of resources, a huge number of you were impacted by this process. And why is that? And why is it important? Well, it's important because we did it because we know that there is no university without you, and we want you to be the best you can be. And secondly, we have to make some critical decisions about what resources we do have. And that's why I spent all that time telling you how we're going to generate new resources. The last thing I want you to do, those of you that believe what we do and do it well, is to leave or to not come. The worst thing. If we don't replenish the quality and the insight and the sense of passion for learning that exists in this room with your successors, then we lose in the long run, and the game's over. So how do you do that? You find ways of saying thank you, and we do it with awards, and we do it with Appreciation Day in a couple of weeks. We do it in a variety of ways. But I know for those of you, particularly those of you that have families and those kinds of obligations that really press you, and we all pass through those periods, changes in remuneration can make a big difference. So whether it was big or small, whatever, over the last couple of years, I want you to know that quite literally millions of dollars have been moved around. And in the process, I think the people in administration area, everyone that's been involved with the process, our goal is to have you compensated appropriately. And let me just say this, because I probably won't get to this level before my ship sails or whatever. I have never accepted being any percentage of average. It simply is unpalatable to me that I would say that you are so good at what you're doing that I got you to 90% of your peer average. Most of you that I know are not average. I don't consider myself nor any of the cabinet members average. So this is all an aspiring process. This is not status quo. We will continue to push for what we appropriately need to have in order to make sure that you know that what you do is important to us. Well, the other day, I was interviewed by an unnamed news agency. And the 3 journalists were asking me all kinds of questions, and one of the questions really caught me off guard. So they said, so tell me, President Betz, What's going to be your legacy? So I was thinking, I said, gee, I never really thought about this before. Well, they started rattling off presidents that I've known in the past. I've been in Oklahoma since '71, so I know most of the presidents. All the things they built, and all of them very important and appropriate. And what they were looking for from me was a list of buildings. So they built this, and so when are you going to put up your Taj Mahal or whatever? So pens at the ready. I'm sitting there. Of course, I didn't know what the question was going to be. But I thought about this period of embracing dynamic change. I thought about this unrivaled challenge we're going through, and yet the opportunity. And I guess for me, the response has to be framed in a different way. Obviously, the need for the appropriate kind of buildings and physical quarters that we need to do this right. We're going to go after them with a passion. But I think that the legacy has virtually nothing to do with bricks and mortar. I have a feeling they'll all eventually fade away, though we hope this university persists forever. But I think our legacy is really what we sow deep inside of the people. Our students and our culture. Have we discovered and implemented an institutional persona that is student and learning focused? Do they leave us with a sense of curiosity, with a passion for learning and leading and serving, that you heard me say before? Do they leave us with the tools and motivation to learn how to learn? Probably the best thing we can do for them as they make their way from 25 to 65 or beyond in the workforce. Do they leave prepared with a growing sense of confidence in themselves and a deep sense of responsibility for others? Did we, each of us, play the key roles in mentoring them? And as we said earlier, did we model the way? Well, only you can answer that for yourself. But I believe that their creativity will fuel our future. And I also believe that their creativity and the flames of curiosity and integrity that will guide them were instilled by you. This is not a dispassionate process. This is not cerebral. This is intensely human. We are changing people's lives for good or ill virtually every time they cross our paths. They're going to create the next iteration of the place we call home. So from this campus, rippling out as far as imagination and intelligence, persistence and ambition, perhaps a sense of duty and honor can venture, they can become the living expression of these values that we talk about. They become perhaps the expression of the vision that brought you here, metaphorically, in the first place. If we do this right and well and good, then they will see and perhaps live this mission of ours, this vision. We are all working for success in a dynamic era, but now we have to embrace one another in a level of collaboration unprecedented and harness the winds of change for all the right reasons. Jeffrey Sachs, in his book about John Kennedy, just recently released, said that there are those pivotal points in history when leaders and people make decisions about the future, and that individual acts of leadership can make a profound difference for good or ill. I believe we're at one of those hinges of history where individuals, and I'm looking at each one of you, can make a vast difference. So I agree with Sachs. Now it's our turn. Maybe not to sign the partial test ban treaty like JFK did, but we know that the task is large, and we know that past acts of leadership have inspired us and encouraged us. But now it's our turn to stand together, stand up, and to move the world. Together. Have a phenomenal year.